Let's talk about customer acquisition and how you can figure out how many customers you will get, how much it'll cost. That's the name of the game. So we can think about this breaking it down into a bunch of big questions. These are really the questions you want to answer on the customer side and on the channel side. So we know what customers are. They're the people that you're trying to serve and create value for. Channels are the ways that we connect with those customers. So we can connect with them to advertise and get messages to them. We can connect with them to deliver products to them. We can connect with them to get paid by them. We can connect with them to deliver products to them. All of those are channels. When it comes to customer acquisition, we're really talking about those channels that allow you to reach customers with your message and get them to make a purchase. That's what customer acquisition is. So let's look at these questions one by one. First of all, on the customer side, you have to think about, do you really understand your customer segments? And it helps for us to understand what a customer segment is. And I'm going to show you this video to figure that out.
Market segmentation is probably at the very, very center of go-to-market strategy that's successful. So first of all, let's talk about what is a market segment. So a market segment is a group of people that have two things in common. One is a use case. They have a common set of needs that they would be fulfilling through a product like yours or someone else's. And secondly, and this is the one people miss, they talk to each other. So a segment is actually a unit of conversation, and therefore, and the reason why that's so important is that if you can get your marketing message circulating inside a segment, the segment will circulate it for you. No entrepreneur can afford to go out and pay to address every prospect that they want to sell to. You have to have your community selling for you, but that means you have to be able to model the boundaries of that community and be able to aim your marketing communications activities in a way that that community embraces them and that it resonates inside that community. So just to make that point crystal clear, when you talk about your product, you're saying things that apply to many communities. That will not resonate inside a community. When you talk about the specific needs of that community in the language that community talks to itself about, even when you're not talking about you, now you're going to resonate with that community. So the market segmentation in that sense is a communications vehicle to make sure you talk the talk of the customer so that they can then walk the walk with you as you're going forward. So that's idea number one. The second thing about market segmentation, and this is kind of a fun experience you have if you've been marketing for a while, fun if you like learning with pain. So the idea is whenever you think about a segment, people usually they draw a circle. And they say, okay, so we're targeting this segment. And then inevitably somebody comes along and says, well, what about this customer who's right at the edge of the circle, almost inside, but not quite. And then, well, okay, we'll bring them in too. And then, well, we'll bring these people in here. And then we'll bring, and pretty soon there's no integrity to the process at all. So what we've learned about segments is you cannot define a segment by its boundary, because wherever you draw a line, there'll be somebody just on the other side of that line who's pretty darn close to the segment, right? So what you do instead is you define segments by their center points. What you do, this is where they get this idea called the poster child. The poster child is the perfect exemplar, the ideal representation of the target customer with the compelling reason to buy. And that person, and often you create something that they call a persona, which would be the embodiment of that target customer. And then you aim all of your marketing communications at that one person because it resonates with all the people around them. And furthermore, you get your engineering and you aim all of your engineering at solving the use case exactly the way that customer would like it solved. And again, that engineering will resonate with people around. And so therefore, you can act on the world in units of use cases and word-of-mouth groups. And so segmentation is designed to allow you to leverage engineering to the point where the world is on your side. As soon as you go outside the use case and as soon as you go outside the conversation group, the world is no longer working with you. They may not be working against you, but they're not working with you. And as an entrepreneur at the beginning, you desperately need the world to work with you. Eventually, if you become a global standard, then you don't need conversation groups. Google does not need a conversation group. It is a global standard, but most of us are not Google. And so particularly at the beginning, and even at the beginning, Google was not Google. So how do you get started with those early groups?
So there's some good points there, right? Especially targeting the middle of a segment, the center of a segment, and understanding that that's the way to reach the rest of the segment. So how do we understand the characteristics of those segments? How do we describe them? Well, some things we already immediately think of, right? So age, gender, females age 18 to 28 or something like that. But there's a lot more to it than that, right? It's about defining who these people are that have common use case characteristics, as you heard in the video, and who are talking to each other. So where do they live and work and play? If you're talking about the same group of people who live in Paris, France, and the others that live in Oxford, Ohio, that's not the same customer segment because they don't talk to each other. They don't live together. They don't share those common experiences, even if they have the same use case. So here's some of the examples of things you can see here. And the thing to point out as you're reading them is to look at behavior also, right? So it's people that are doing common things and talking to each other. So think about all these things when you're trying to define a customer segment. So the other thing to think about is these two questions, right? Who are they talking to? So when you talked about people in a customer segment being people who talk with one another, who do they talk to and what do they talk about? So you can find this out by looking places like social media. So find social media groups, Facebook groups, etc., where you find groups of people together who would be in the same segment and find out who's talking to whom and what are the topics that they're talking about. You can join those groups. There's no reason you can't. You have a genuine interest in what they're doing. There's nothing weird or unethical about it. Just be cool and it'll be fine. You can look at their group affiliations, right? So do they belong to clubs or organizations or interest groups? I myself, as you all know, am a avid home brewer and a craft beer nerd. So I belong to the American Homebrewers Association, and I belong to a group of beer judges and a homebrew club and lots of those things. So there's a lot you can learn by looking at those things. Of course, there's also direct observation, right? You can go and see what people are doing, going to concerts or conferences, places like that. That those are great places to observe what's happening and what people are doing. And then don't forget about snowball sampling. What is that? It means when you observe people and talk with them, ask them questions about who else they should be talking to. Where are other groups like this? If you visited a home brewing session with my friends and me, we might tell you about lots of other people that we know in that same craft beer community. So the next big question is, what are they really looking for? We already talked about who they're talking to and what they're talking about, but what are they looking for? So here's some tools that you can use. The neilpatel.com and the SpyFu tools allow you to look and see what customers are looking for. What do their Google searches look like? You can explore those things, look at them in different ways, and understand kind of what your message should be. You can also listen in on those conversations, again, sort of diving into social media, for example, and listening in. Shadowing someone is another way, obviously with their permission, but job shadowing or hanging out at somebody's place of work, for example, if there's somebody that you want to target, that kind of organization. Another way to understand your customers is to think about them in terms of segment characteristics. So here are a couple of tools. The Prism website allows you to go and see descriptions of different groups of people and the things that they do, and then building personas that describe a specific perfect example of your customer segment, that so-called poster child. So what these things allow you to do is see things like, say, well, people who have this persona and people who embody this is what they're like. These are the kind of things that they do. And you can see in the persona picture down there, for example, the Lakers and the Honda. So you wouldn't necessarily be using the same channels as Honda. Maybe you're not running Super Bowl ads or anything like that. But this guy, Jack Rowland, maybe you can figure out the kind of things that Honda is doing to reach somebody like Jack, and you could copy those things, or the things that the Lakers are doing. Beyond the bigger things that maybe are outside of your means, they're doing a lot of things, and there are a lot of lessons that can be learned. So how big is your addressable market? Here's a nice little trick. If you use Facebook, not everyone in the world is on Facebook, but almost. So you can use Facebook to get a really good estimate of what that customer segment size actually is. So if you go to the part of Facebook where they're selling ads, I believe it's facebook.com/ads, they have a lot of tools there, and their goal is to try to sell ad space to you. And so they make it very easy. You can punch in all the characteristics of that segment and get an estimate of how many people are out there that are like that. And you can also limit it by location. So looking at, for example, the state of Ohio or the city of Chicago or something like that is a way that you can get an estimate of an audience size, all the way down to like a neighborhood level audience size, which is really pretty interesting. So how do you know who else is targeting them? This is a great way to understand. As I mentioned before with the example of Honda, if you know what other organizations are doing, the channels they're using, you can use those same channels and take a lot of lessons from them. So Prism Segments is, again, a good way to do that. You can go back and check that out. But another way to look at this is to think about industry associations. Every industry you can think of in the world has some sort of industry association, and probably many industry associations. You can join those associations as a member, or you can just go and check out their websites, so you can go to their conferences. You can see who their expert speakers are. You can see who the people are that are advertising in their publications. You can see all these stats. So in the example of the National Coffee Association that you see here, all of these infographic kind of stats, this is the kind of place, this organization, this industry association, those are the ones that are producing those stats that you see about how many people drink how much coffee per day. They're using those things to try to help coffee companies, and they'll help you. Let's move on to channels. So if you remember the marketing funnel, it's about moving people down through the funnel from the point where you first contact them to the point where you're making a sale. So if we look at it here on the left side, this is the actions that you as a company are doing. This is what you're trying to accomplish. And if you look on the right side, this is what hopefully is happening on the customer side. So at the very top of the funnel, you're doing promotion work. The channels you're using are trying to promote and provide information about your company, your product, your service. And what you're trying to do on the customer side is make them aware. Make them aware that you exist, make them aware of your product or service, and let them know that it's out there and something they might be interested in. If you're able to do that, the next phase is engagement, right? So on your side, you're thinking about trying to engage, and that the channels you're using are aimed at engaging with customers. And hopefully what they are doing is then considering your product or service. If they are now aware of your product and you are engaging with them so that they have a chance to really think about and consider whether this is the right thing for them. And then the final stage, of course, is making a sale. That's what you're hoping to do. And the channels that you're trying to use are channels that are oriented toward closing sales. And hopefully on the customer side, what they're doing then is taking action and buying your product. So what does it cost to use these channels, and how effective will they be? This is a key thing that you're going to want to know, because it'll help you make strategic decisions and understand what it's going to cost. So the first thing you can do is go to the source. The good news about channels, most channels, especially when it comes to advertising and promotion, things like that, is that those channels exist. Their job, their value proposition to people like you, to companies like yours, is that we can answer these questions. What will it cost to reach customers, and how effective will this channel be at doing that? That's their job. That's what you're paying them for. That's why you pay your advertising dollars, to put your information on their networks, on their channels. And so that's their job. Everything from a Facebook or Google AdWords network all the way to a billboard that you'd see on a bench or on the side of a bus. Believe it or not, the people who put those billboards on the sides of buses actually have very good data to tell you how effective it'll be, how many people will see that, and how many people will actually act and follow up because of seeing something on the side of a bus. It seems like that would be hard to do, and it probably is, but that's their job. So the first thing you should do is go to that source, the ad networks, media outlets, sales agents, and find out from them how much will it cost to use your channel and how effective should I expect it to be. The other thing you can do is to look at some benchmarks, right? So here are some links that will tell you the ballpark estimates of different kinds of products and services and what it usually costs to acquire customers through common channels for those particular kinds of products or services. And one example you can look at, I'd point you to in particular, is some data on what it costs to convert freemium business model people, potential customers, to paying customers. It's pretty eye-opening. You should check it out. So those are the basics of customer acquisition. Check out these tools, think about it, and think about answering these questions. Do you really understand your customer segments? How big is that addressable market that customer segment or segments represent? And do you know who else is targeting them and what that looks like? And then on the channel side, what parts of the marketing funnel will the channel target? Will it be about engagement? Will it be about promotion? Will it be about sales? What will it be? Also, what does it cost to use these channels, and about how effective do you expect that they'll be? If you can answer these questions, you're well on your way to understanding customer acquisition, what it'll cost you, and making smart strategic decisions. That's all for this time. See you later.